devices, Internet of Things, and everything in between. For those of you who don't know, I'm Kelly Clay. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Wearable World News. I'm here to welcome you guys to GLAZED. If you don't know the Wi-Fi, we have Wi-Fi for you guys. It's on the screens right there. We also have a hashtag, so if you want to share what you're learning, it's just GLAZECon, GLAZEDCON. Make sure you tweet that. It's really, really important to use that hashtag. So yeah, welcome. I would like to introduce to you now the MC for today's Enterprise track, Melissa Thompson. She is the founder of
Talk Sessions,
sorry, forgot that. She's been featured on CNET, Bloomberg, a bunch of other really high quality news stations. And I'd like to welcome Melissa. Thank you.
Thanks. Center stage. And we're very lucky that the smartest companies are looking into the smartest devices, and we have a lot of those executives here today. So for some housekeeping, we have 4 panels, 20 minutes each, and then we'll go to a break and then we'll resume. It's my pleasure to introduce the first panel, which is doubling down on data in a wearable world. And here with us today, we have one of the co-founders of Basis, which has recently been acquired by Intel, Marco Di La Torre, as well as Christina Farr, technology correspondent for Thomson Reuters.
Thanks. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. I know we were sort of downstairs and a little hard to find, so really, really appreciate you being here.
We got the smartest people.
We got the best audience. So just to get to know you guys, we thought we would just kind of talk about things that would be relevant to you. So just a little hands up if you're an entrepreneur. Any executives or do you work at a tech company? Okay, and anybody in here currently wearing a wearable device? Pretty much everyone. So it looks like we have a sprinkling of entrepreneurs like yourself. So just for their purposes, you started Basis, which was recently acquired. What do you think about sort of the climate now to start a wearables company versus when you were starting out?
I think it's really exciting now. I think when my co-founders and I started Basis, hardware wasn't cool. It wasn't so long ago, and there weren't nearly as many tools as there are today to develop hardware. So today you have really great accelerators focused on hardware. You have big companies that do hardware at very large scale, helping out entrepreneurs at a small scale, which I think is really important, because it's hard to get off the ground in hardware. It's expensive. So I think the climate for sort of starting new business is really strong, but also I think just the amount of interest in wearable technology right now is growing so quickly, and it's so big right now that you're going to get visibility that you might not have gotten half dozen years ago.
So if you were starting one now, would you go to the VCs on Sand Hill Road, or would you go straight to, say, a Kickstarter and Indiegogo?
That's a great question. I think there's certainly an argument for each way. I think I certainly wish we had the option to do the Kickstarter or Indiegogo path when we started. Just from an entrepreneur's perspective, non-dilutive financing is amazing because you're not giving up any of your business for that initial cash influx to build the product. Mm-hmm. That being said, we had a really good experience with VCs. They add a lot of value if you pick the right ones. I think one of the things we did right early was to find investors who were really passionate about what we were doing. And even in the case where they weren't really sure where it would end up, they really believed in sort of the things that we saw as the future. So things like looking at behavior change and looking at how you actually engage people in their data rather than just flooding them with information. We found some investors who really understood the value of gamification and adding meaning to data.
Yep, and along those lines, I've got this cool experiment going on at work where I'm trying to use a Jawbone Up to track all of my movements every day. And my colleague, who sits right opposite me, has just a normal kind of scale, and he weighs himself twice a day and just writes down the results in an Excel spreadsheet with like a little kind of note for when he's had alcohol and how much he's eaten that day. And you know, between us, I feel like his data is probably a lot more accurate than mine. So are we still, you know, at that point where kind of early wearables are just, you know, still there's moments where they don't work for hours, the battery life is poor. Are we still at the point where it's just even more effective to do it manually?
I mean, the easy response is you picked the wrong wearable. I think we are still in the early days. I think a lot of the wearables that people are talking about right now are really operating on borrowed technology. You know, it's not technology that was developed specifically for that device. It's technology in many cases that's been around for many years and it's being repurposed for this technology. I think, you know, coming back to the opportunity right now for entrepreneurs, I see a really big target on the space of new sensors and new detection capabilities. I think the days of just having an accelerometer and counting steps are behind us. So I think your friend who's manually tracking is certainly doing it in the most rigorous way, but if you look at the amount of time they're spending on that, that's really not something that many people at all are going to invest in the greater community. So I think striking that balance of making it work for everyone, but also having the right amount of sort of rigor in the outcome is really important. You know, one of the things we did at Basis, which I'm really proud of, is we released a white paper recently that compared our sleep technology to polysomnographs. So in other words, like a medical sleep evaluation. And it was really similar. And we knew that because that's how we developed the technology. So I think there's a burden on companies like Jawbone and like Basis and so on to do a better job of scientific rigor around their detections and actually exposing that as they release features, giving us confidence that what they're telling us is real about our lives and the data that they're showing us is actually true.
Yep, and one of the issues that entrepreneurs may have to face, especially if you're considering building a wearables company, you're talking now about using scientific research and having sort of a clinical basis for what you're doing, but how do you kind of ensure that you draw a fine line between what is considered wellness and what's remote patient monitoring, and this is a space that's going to get regulated. So how do you ensure you don't fall into this bucket?
Yeah, I mean, the FDA is pretty clear about where that line is, and with the mobile guidance from last year, that's become even clearer. You know, we know that as soon as you stray into treating specific conditions, you're in trouble with the FDA, or at least you're in danger of being regulated by them. And I think that's a perfectly great decision to make consciously. So I actually anticipate that there'll be more companies that consciously make that decision to be regulated by the FDA, release devices that have that oversight because they're specifically targeting conditions. You know, I see really great technology coming to bear right now around Parkinson's and diabetes. I think that's really important. And I think, you know, we in the consumer world tend to get a little bit scared off by the healthcare system. In reality, I think there are huge opportunities there to take the technology that we're developing to help people in the general sense and make specific applications for conditions. But you have to be aware of where that line is.
Yeah, and I'm noticing sort of a blurring of those lines as a lot of the traditional consumer folks seem to be taking more of an interest in sort of the medical side of things. So do you think this sort of next generation of wearables that are emerging now are going to start to do, you know, they're for a mass market, but they're going to start to do much more sort of sophisticated medical, even potentially even diagnoses?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is where you know, really the scale of this industry comes in, because you need a different level of investment to approach that. It's not the kind of thing you can do in your garage and take through the FDA and release to the healthcare system. So that's where the larger players in the industry come in. I'm curious, a lot of people were wearing wearable devices. Anyone out there wearing a wearable device because they have a medical condition or something about their health in particular that they're tracking? Right, so most people are actually tracking more generally. And I realize this is a specific sample because we're in San Francisco and at the Wearable Conference, but I think as the wearable devices start to get tied into the healthcare system, that ratio will flip. You know, I think
I agree, especially with conditions like pre-diabetes,
right,
which are all the rage now.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I think especially if people have an incentive on the healthcare side to do that, for example, if their premiums come down, or if they're getting money into their HSA, or if there's some sort of direct cash feedback into their healthcare spend, I think that makes people track things specifically related to the conditions that they're dealing with.
Yeah, it's a natural fit for a wearables company.
Right.
So your advice would be, do not be scared off by
Don't be scared
big
off.
bad
Be
regulator.
conscious which side of the line you're on and stick there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what are you doing these days? I mean, you're at Intel now.
Right.
I asked you what your role was at Intel. It sounds like it's still kind of
I'm a troublemaker. Yeah. I think.
chief troublemaker.
Yeah, I'll take that. I think. In a case where a small company like Basis joins a large company like Intel, there's a lot of value in the interface of the creativity and sort of experience in wearables that Basis brings, in particular in health and fitness, and the incredible engineering and design that Intel brings to the table. So we're still figuring that out. I think you've seen some amazing things that Intel's done quickly in this space. Some of them are demonstrated upstairs. If you haven't seen them, you should check them out. Wireless charging and lots of sort of biosignal-related technology. I think it's really exciting for me personally that a company like Basis can have a partnership with a company like Intel and to execute the vision that we imagined in the early days. My background's in medical devices. I really believe in empowering people with data, and I think a company like Intel can provide the impetus for a company like Basis to really do that on a much larger scale more quickly.
Yeah. So why are all these big tech companies like Intel, Google, Apple, why are they getting into this whole wearables space?
I think I have two answers. So the cynical answer is I think they realize that it's big business.
Money, money, money.
Well, it doesn't help to get your attention. Doesn't hurt to get your attention that way.
Yeah.
The original sort of startups in the space in the recent times of wearables have sort of reached a maturity where they're global and they're in a lot of channels and they're sort of ubiquitous on people's wrists. I think that just captures attention. I think the real answer is not that. I think the real answer is that computing is evolving, and we've moved from servers and desktops into a laptop world and then into a mobile world. I think this is, in many ways, a natural progression. Though, of course, I'm biased because it was part of the motivation for Basis. But I think really the opportunity to have a more personal relationship with people out there is hard to pass up. People think of the smartphone as being a relationship with a customer. And I think this relationship that you have on a wearable is so much more constant and more present that I think that's a really important way to engage with customers. So actually I think aside from sort of the business side of things, there's an opportunity here to be more directly involved with people in every moment, not just sort of certain specific times in the day. For example, you wake up in the morning, you check how much you slept, and you check how well you slept. But then there's 50 other health decisions that you make in the day. For example, you choose whether you walk or ride or drive your car. You choose what you have for breakfast. These are all choices that could be guided by data. And there's so many interaction points that happen along that way where wearables can uniquely enable you.
I had a really embarrassing moment the other day of reaching something like 9,600 steps and just like pacing around in my room for the last 400 just because I needed to get to my 10,000 steps.
I've been there too.
We've probably all been there.
Although in reality, you just got 400 steps of exercise that you wouldn't have got otherwise.
It's true.
So I think it's dangerous to begrudge yourself that extra effort.
Yep.
I think the danger there is when you start sort of waving your hand around and not actually doing the exercise and trying to fool the algorithms.
Don't tell me that. I want to figure out a way to beat the system here.
Right. Well, we all do.
All right. One last question before we jump to better questions from all of you. So there's a lot of different metrics that we're tracking now, and I feel like the only one that I'm sort of consistently impressed by is step count. But we're hearing companies talk about blood pressure and heart rate, and sometimes even glucose monitoring, although I think that's a little bit in the future. So what's sort of the holy grail for getting right in terms of a body metric to track?
So I'll answer your question, then I'll maybe change it a little bit. So I think the holy grail is something different. But in terms of body metrics, I think it's clear that multi-sensor is the way of the future. Basis started out in that world with heart rate and skin temperature and perspiration and a lot more data points that capture your reality. My heart rate's elevated here on stage.
Are you nervous?
Absolutely. I'm in your presence, come on. I think if you just look at step count, you're going to miss a lot of the realities of your life. Even just exercises that don't involve ambulatory movement. But actually, I think the holy grail is bringing together these things that relate to our health and are interesting for that reason with all the other things in our lives that are interesting. There's very little crossover now between things like step counts and health metrics and the things that we connect most of our lives to, social and enterprise and all those things. I think tying all that together means that you have so many points of value in your day that the wearable becomes essential.
Yep.
It's something that you don't leave home without.
Okay, and the Holy Grail?
I think that is the Holy Grail. I think it's actually bringing together a more accurate version of what we're seeing today in sort of pedometer devices with connections of social and enterprise and so forth, so that you're using it for all those different things. You're not just using it for your step counts, you're using it for connecting with friends, you're using it for competing against friends, you're using it to remember people who you meet at a conference. I think all those pieces together mean that the motivation for the wearable is not just one thing, in other words, your step count or your sleep, it's really your whole lifestyle. And that's where we see expansion into that area, I think, is really important.
Okay, I lied. One more question. So, you know, I've seen from Apple and Samsung in the last week, Samsung announced Sammy, and then Apple came along with HealthKit. So these are platforms or services for integration. So they talk a lot about bringing all of this data together into one place. Do I want Apple and Samsung to have all of my health data in one place? Is this the right approach, or should consumers be concerned about sort of privacy here?
I think they should be wary. It's an incremental step on what they already have. They already have your financial information. They have access to the data on your cell phone, which is across all aspects of your life. I think the real question for those platforms is, where does the value come back to the customer? And that's what motivates you to participate. Because if it's as simple as aggregating that information, I don't think that's going to be enough.
Yeah.
If that aggregation can come back in insights that you wouldn't have unless you contributed your data to that platform, that's when you start to be okay with that level of contribution. So I think one of the things we've noticed in wearables around health tracking these days is it's really about giving people enough value that they're happy to be part of the system. And that's pretty easy to do around health because people are all interested in proving that. I think when you sort of broaden that to multiple devices or tying in all different information from your lifestyle, that's when you really have to be careful that you're not just putting things together, but actually creating something that's better than the sum of those. So I think that's the challenge.
So people are willing to give up this information if they get something in return?
Yeah, something significantly more than the sum of what they're giving.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. All right, any questions from the audience? Yeah, we got one over here.
I'm really excited about it. I don't know what, Christina might be more worried about it if she's got concerns about accuracy.
Oh, implantables?
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about the taking them in and out process, because battery life isn't very long, so it's every few days you have to have a...
No, I'm really excited about it. We see wireless charging technology that can go through the skin, so I'm less worried about that. I think that's a case where regulation is great. You know, I certainly don't want to implant something in my body without excellent oversight from the FDA around that. So I think that's a situation where we all have to remember that regulation can be really important. But I also think that starts in a case where the cost is justified. So for example, step counts are really interesting in some cases, but whether you'd be willing to pay thousands of dollars for that level of feature because it's implanted, probably not. So the question is, where do we get to the point where the cost of that procedure and the risk, remember that being in hospital is the place you're most likely to get sick. So taking that risk in terms of cost and your health overall has to be justified by the benefit of that implantable. And of course we see that with things like pacemakers, where the value is that you live, so you take that risk. I don't think we're quite there yet with consumer trackers, nor should we be. But I think there's an amazing road ahead there. My original work was in medical devices and in a lab that was doing the bionic eye, which was a brain implantable. And in that case, we were implanting an array of electrodes in the brain that were stimulated to actually create vision. So the value there was you can see. And in that case, well, you're willing to take the risk of the cost and all of that sort of surgical invasiveness that comes with opening up your skull, but the value is so high that you accept that. So I think much in the case of consumer wearables, where maybe step counts aren't enough, but once you get into sort of resting heart rate and sleep patterns and tying together motivations, behavior change, you start to really want to wear these devices. I think the same thing for implantables, the bar is just much higher.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about implantables for glucose monitoring, although the non-invasive approach versus minimally is probably ideal.
Right. Sure.
Another question? Shoot.
Melissa? Mostly for now, they're looking for answers, although we're really trying to engage them in that dialogue. I think one thing that Intel has actually contributed a lot to Basis is that they're very strong on making wearables more fitting into people's lifestyles. So they have a very strong focus on fashion. They have a partnership with Council of Fashion Designers for America, with Barney's, with Opening Ceremony. And those partnerships show that this is really about making wearables more a part of people's lives as they want them to be, rather than sort of an add-on that they have to deal with. You know, one of the things we did early at Basis was create a device that's customizable, so you can actually change the colors and sort of what it looks like. And that's been a really big success because we all want to have signatures of our style, you know, and so at an aesthetic level, that's really important. I think at a sort of an insights level, this is where it comes back to how does the wearable contribute value, not just in one area, but across everything. So, for example, I love knowing my sleep patterns. I get up and I check how much REM sleep and deep sleep I've had, so I know how well recovered I am. But I can also use that in an enterprise setting because I know that if my morning meeting is really important, I better make sure I get plenty of REM sleep before that. So in that situation, there's an opportunity to derive insight that's not just about health directly, it's also about performance and sort of business applications. So it's coming.
Or when you can drink your last cup of coffee before your sleep's going to be affected.
Right, exactly.
As a follow-on, do you find that you create population health metrics as you evolve and aggregate the data? Do you work beyond enterprise to larger scale data sets?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's really the value of having automatic tracking as well. I think one of the things that we focused on early at Basis, which has been really successful, is automatically detecting what people are doing. So you don't have to tell the device that you're falling asleep or waking up or you're starting a walk or you're going for a bike ride. The device actually detects all that automatically. So when we look at the data across the population, we have a really good picture of what your day looked like. You know, we know when you woke up and when you walked to the office, and if you had a workout and went for a run, we know that too. We know when you fell asleep. So the complexity of that data is high, but the amount of information inside there is complete because we've detected all these things automatically. So I think part of the value in getting the insights is having, across the population, a more complete database of what people are doing. Otherwise, you just know their step counts. There might not be as much to learn.
Great. Well, thank you. Making wearables more wearable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Christina and Marco. So next we have looking ahead, wearables in the workforce, which is a vital cog of today's track. And we have with us Joe Burton, the CTO of wearable pioneer Plantronics, along with the inimitable CEO and founder of Wearable World and the smartest sensor in the smart market, Reg Snodgrass. And they are getting ready to come on stage.
All right, everybody, welcome to this event. Let's get this party started right. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
It's a little empty. Just to kind of kick things off, first off, Joe, Plantronics is one of the most storied and most innovative companies in wearable technology for years, but it seems like things grew cold for a little bit. Why should we care now, and why are wearables important from your perspective?
Well, you know, a couple things I'd say about that. I'm not sure if things went cold for a while, but Plantronics is about a 53-year-old intelligent headset company out of Santa Cruz. Was very much a wearable startup, and they saw some needs. They went in and did it, and built some really interesting things for airplanes, space program, da-da-da. A few years ago, Plantronics had found that they had assembled the right set of people around tiny wireless technology, battery technology, some cloud people and whatnot. And when the huge influx of cheap, low-power sensors came on, Plantronics saw a real ability to start adding into their products not only world-class audio, but the ability to understand, is it on your body, off your body, near things, temperature, moisture, da-da-da. So in actually building that into a bunch of the headset type products for the primarily the enterprise and exposing it through APIs, they suddenly found that they weren't just a headset, they were the beginning of a very interesting wearable, and we've decided to talk about it a little more over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, I will tell you, because from a consumer perspective, before I really entered this industry, I didn't really understand the storied history behind Plantronics. But as I got to dig in, as I got to meet some of your team and start to really understand, like you guys have had huge impacts in setting the baseline for this huge influx of people really caring about wearable technology today. Tell me how you guys have kind of pushed the limit in the next iteration of wearables. What are you seeing kind of coming down the plate, and from your perspective as the CTO?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I mean, you mentioned blessed. I am blessed to be at such a cool company, and I just lost audio and it's back.
Yeah, it's right.
Excellent, good. So there's a whole bunch of really cool people at Plantronics, and it is just incredibly focused on how do we actually make people's lives more enjoyable and make their business life more interesting. And I'll talk about that, and I said interesting, not more productive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to do that, the company really has assembled a bunch of cool people that want to work in Santa Cruz and want to work on this wearable problem. So, I mean, our user experience lab and user experience team are just some of the most interesting people in the world, and just amazingly funded for a small, medium-sized company. Incredible innovation team that came out of a variety of different Valley companies and Seattle companies to build all these things. But it's an incredible focus on how do we make your life better at home and at work. And we talk an awful lot. We just get around and talk. Yeah. How do we make your life, your mom's life better, and yet build something she would possibly wear?
Yeah,
we actually talk about that.
I actually have to confess this. I did send a set of your wireless headphones to my mother, and she loves it.
And she uses it.
She uses it every day. And that was one of the things I'm like, oh my God, why do we not have more of this stuff? Because the ease of use, where you just have something where you just plug it in and it actually works, is something that made Apple, a huge company. And that's what I see from you guys, and I'm seeing you guys as one of those pioneers.
Well, I have to say, it is one of the things that it is one of the things that drives me there, is that passion. I mean, I was in the lab the other day, and it was great, because this guy had one of our old products and one of our new products, and he's like, "Oh, we can't ship." I'm like, "What's up?" He says, "Well, watch this." He turns them both on, and the lights come on, and he says, "Did you see that?"
Yeah.
I go, "Do it again." He says, "Did you see that?" I said, "Okay, I give up what?" He says, "Lights, it's a slightly different color. It came on at a different rate. I mean, we can't ship."
Oh, wow.
Okay, but there's that kind of meticulousness going in, not only to the quality of the products, very much a God's in the detail type approach, but a real focus on where do wearables fit in. I mean, the last group talked an awful lot about that fine line between enabling your life and the invasion of your privacy.
Yep.
And whatnot. So we spend an awful lot of time on that, and I think there's some things we're sorting out, and there's some things as an industry, as a society, we still need to sort out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that is really interesting. I mean, I love, you being a CTO, being passionate about, the user interface, being passionate about design. How do you as a CTO instill that type of confidence from your team to say things like, "You know what, this isn't right, don't ship it," right? How do you breed that into your people? Because there are a lot of CTOs out here that are curious to know, how do I create that as well for me?
It's a really interesting, healthy tension to get into an organization, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, we do have a very strong user experience, customer focus. And by the way, one of the things that I put in my team very, very closely is do not listen to our customers. Treat them like children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Listen to everything they say. Think about it deeply, and then give them what they actually need, and tell them you love them.
Yeah, it's very Steve Jobs. So
we spend a lot of time on this, on really deeply listening to the customers, but also thinking about what's really good. So we got a team that's really focused on that. And then we have an innovation team that is just hammering on what's the latest bleeding edge technology. One of the things they're focused on is very much, we always talk about what's becoming possible. So it isn't possible today, but if we watch the trend lines, boy, in 2 or 3 years, either the sensor is going to cross a threshold where it could be included in a wearable, or a patent's going to run out and some price is going to drop from $500 to a quarter in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So we kind of bring together that treat your customers like children and think deeply about what's good for them, and look at what's becoming possible, and periodically a little magic falls our way.
So what are some of the things that you are being blown away by on the research side that you can talk about? What are some of the things that you're just like, oh man, this is cool, I can't wait until blah?
Well, you know, there's a bunch of stuff going on. There's a bunch of stuff going on and several that I can't talk about, but I'll talk generally if you don't mind. So one of the things that I see that's really interesting, and it'll lead to what I think is the biggest issue for the industry going forward. First of all, I see some people focused on very precise but fairly expensive sensors and measurement type techniques, and frankly, you know, you said you have a Bell Labs history, right?
Yep.
I almost see the perfectly accurate but somewhat expensive technique as being a bit of a telco approach, and ultimately the wrong thing, unless we're talking about an implantable glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Instead, we're seeing very much more the internet model of many, many cheap sensors and cheap signals all being aggregated together to create a level of accuracy.
Yep.
So one of the things we're seeing right now is the ability to actually weld into even a wearable headset or a wristband or whatever, not 2 or 3 sensors, but dozens of weak, cheap sensors. And really push an awful lot of data into the cloud. So one of the things that's pretty cool that we're starting to see is that I can talk about is when I'm wired up and really quantifying myself, we're finding that not only do we understand, you know, is Joe's temperature going up and down, how's he moving, et cetera, but pretty quickly you can actually get a pattern of Joe the individual.
Yep.
Is Joe excited and engaged, or is Joe skeptical? Or is Joe pretending to be engaged, but he's really not?
Got it.
Okay, so it turns out that we're on the edge of being able to do these things, and that's really, really cool, but there's a couple of particular questions that come up. First of all, when I'm quantifying that data on myself, if my employer paid for the devices or if it's during the workday, what are my rights versus their rights around this data? So are they allowed to know every single thing? Now, the good story on this is that, you know, we can actually reasonably tell, we believe, in the next few years, if I'm in the zone or not. You know, I mean, if I'm actually in the zone, or on the other hand, I'm just slightly agitated and I can't really think right now, and you can imagine literally changing workflows based on this.
That's amazing.
If I'm in the zone, block all of my email or all of it except for my VIP list and put my phone on hold and let me groove.
Yeah.
If I'm in a terrible, terrible mood, suggest that I take the afternoon off, and maybe if I'm in the middle, even in a contact center, you can imagine routing calls to people based on their current stress levels and personality types, really having an impact going forward. But the question is, you know, that all sounds really good because we're heading into a world where it's not how many widgets do you build an hour, it's what impact do you have. Until you look at a flip side and start talking about, well, you know, Joe, you just weren't in the zone enough this month. We need somebody that is. So, you know, that actually the more troubling one that we've been thinking an awful lot about, that I think as an industry we need to talk about, it is as we're sitting here talking with some of the bleeding edge sensors and whatnot that are going to be in my wearables over the next few years, I'm quantifying me, but I have the ability to quantify you. So the question is, what are my rights to what I find out about you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, for the sake of making a business decision, perhaps I have some rights.
Yeah.
For the sake of bundling up your data and selling it to somebody else, maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much. Yeah.
On the other hand, if this is a business negotiation and I can literally tell on the fly that you're showing signs that there's a 60% chance you're being untruthful, or there's a 60% chance you're emotionally bought in and you're going to say yes no matter what the number is.
Yeah.
You know, I think we got some work to do around that going forward.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, I mean, in reality, like this whole contextual dream that we have is almost about eliminating choice. And when do we say enough? When do I say, hey, you know, you've taken enough choices from me, I'm going to pick, you know, your car shows up and knows you're going to go to your favorite ice cream store because this is the time and your body is right there. You know what? I don't necessarily want to do that, right? But that is the dream that everyone is pushing to. Now, we're light years away from it. But where do we, as a humanity or as a society, say, this is beyond par? Or even as an enterprise and as a good CEO, right? How do you mitigate and actually manage your people? Like, I know this person I talk to hates me every time I see them. Do I fire that person, right? Just by their, no, I just don't know what par is for morality in this world.
So that's really the piece that I was bringing up. You asked what some of the most interesting things we were working on are. So we're seeing that becoming possible. And I didn't say it is, and I didn't necessarily say that it will be, but I don't know. If you go to the high-end sensor shows, if you look in the creepy corners of Mobile World Congress or CES, and you start bringing all those things together and playing through, you can see this world coming. And, you know, more articulate people than I will wind up driving this. But, you know, I really think it's about making us a better version of ourself. Pardon me, giving us the data to be as good of a version of ourself as we want to be. Yep. Okay, I'm a fairly healthy eater. I don't actually want my wearables to nag at me if I decide to have a handful of chips today, right? Yeah, you know it's okay. But it's about making us a better version of ourselves. It's not about running our life for us. Okay. So, and I truly think the real key is that sharing across boundaries thing. Yep. What are your rights to know my innermost secrets need to be up to me, not up to technology, right? I
totally get it. So one of the things that I like to do with, especially like our high-level guests, is pull out my crystal ball. So this is my crystal ball right here. Let's wave it, and let's look at what the next like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months are going to look like in the near future. Will you paint me kind of a picture of how you seeing like wearables play out, and also like where you think some of the pitfalls the community would have that we need to overcome? So just if you could paint that, stroke that picture for me.
You know, I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, and I'll certainly be wrong. But I think one of the things that we're all faced with right now is most of the early wearables, of course, you know, are really interesting products, be they health and wellness wearables or others. But one of the real keys right now is everybody's struggling for precisely what's the business model in the service. A great example. So virtually every fitness product, virtually every sensor network for manufacturing and so forth is an attempt to sell a service. We're selling the hardware, we're selling the software, and we're collecting all this data into the cloud that's going to be fabulously valuable in one way or another. That seems to be everybody's business model. You know, somewhat predictably, along comes Apple yesterday and says, Health Book. Yeah. Okay. Well, if you think about HealthBook, it's a lovely application on your iDevice going forward, but it also says, you guys build devices and devices only and aggregate the data to us, and we'll actually bring together the piece from Nike and the piece from Wahoo Fitness, and we'll find meaning and present it to the user. So there's a really interesting question there around the business model assumptions fundamentally change if device people are in the device business and the software is someplace else. So I think one of the real things to sort out going forward here is indeed, as we move from proprietary stovepipe applications where Nike sells you a fitness thing and and Garmin sells you a hiking thing or a climbing thing, and somebody else sells you something for medicine or for work, and we start bringing them together, There's a whole bunch of standards work to do, a whole bunch of security work to do, but I think the real key is there's business model work to do that's going to kind of bring it back to who can build hardware cheaply and efficiently that can fit into the larger ecosystems that inevitably will grow up.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's take a couple questions from the audience. If anybody has anything, go ahead.
This is about very much about health and wearables. And I gotta say, I was struggling to see a little bit how health has like immediate short-term benefits in the workforce setting. Do you see other wearable applications that have support, when you look at efficiency, that's very important for workforce and enterprise perspective, where you can see that wearables can take benefit?
Yeah, sure. So the question, as I understood it, was we've had a little bit of a health tilt here again, just like everybody else. But how do we actually see, other than a health benefit, all this sorting out and adding efficiency or applicability to the workforce? Close enough? Okay, good. Yeah, so a couple things come to mind really quickly that we've been focused around. And it does actually bring up another facet. So first of all is the ability to actually know from wearables some of the things that I was talking about going forward of how engaged is the user, how not engaged is the user, is it the right time to put a particular phone call through in a contact center. Some of the other things we've been working on is not just individual to the cloud wearables, but actually exploring, anyway, the concepts around understanding how wearables are interacting with each other. So as 15 people are converging on a conference room, what should happen to create a better experience? When there's 10 people in a conference room wondering where Joe is there anything we can do around wearables to say, all right, he's out of the building and his cell phone's not on, versus he's 200 meters away and vectoring towards the room, that helps you understand what to do. So there's things around location, things around group interaction, things around understanding the current state of being rather than health of the person in order to allocate tasks intelligently. Other little things we've been playing with, more and more I don't know if you've experienced it yet, but there's an awful lot of call centers, contact centers that do video now, where you actually call in and there's somebody sitting there that says, hi, how can I help you, right? And it really happens in two places, either high-end financials or the extreme other end. It happens in do-it-yourself scenarios, right? So if you call the certain places at home improvement stores and you've got a question about some pipe or drywall or whatever, you can show them the part and say, here's what I'm trying to do. So some of the stuff we've been playing with is a lot of our wearables and others know if you're near or far from your PC. They know if you're near or far from your cell phone, your tablet, and so forth, literally being able to just take you in and out of the video routing queue. If you're not sitting there, don't route calls to an empty chair. As soon as you come back, flip you in. If you're on your mobile phone and you come in and you get near some fabulous video terminal, offer to seamlessly shift the call to a greater experience. So some of those things I think we'll see a lot of, and it's not just us. There's a fair amount of that work going on out there.
Great. So that's all the time we have today. Joe, thank you so much for blessing us with some time here. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take it away.